This video is about Unit 3 of the Ethics course. In this unit, we're exploring another aspect of applied ethics, some of the ethical dilemmas that organizations can face, and how an organization's ethical path can be established. One of the concepts that the unit introduces that has become more prominent in recent years is the concept of moral hazard. A moral hazard exists when, for any number of reasons, the risks that a person or an organization faces are reduced to the point that the person's or the organization's decisions are influenced by the thought that the person or organization will not have to suffer the consequences of their decision. There are a number of examples of moral hazard and how it impacts a person's or an organization's decision-making process. For instance, a tenured professor is a faculty member who's reached a point where they cannot lose their faculty position except for some very serious transgressions. Typically, a faculty member reaches that position because they're experts in their field and because they've earned a reputation for quality in their teaching and their writing. The moral hazard can become an issue because that tenured professor can decide not to go to class or not to prepare lectures or not to write any more articles and still not lose his or her job. The fact that there are no consequences for non-performance means that he or she could be influenced not to perform, and that's the moral hazard. The same situation can exist for salaried workers. Those are employees who receive a set salary no matter how many hours they work. Typically, salaried workers don't punch a time clock, so no record is kept of the number of hours they work. In many cases, salary workers work more hours than comparably paid hourly workers, but since salaried workers know that no record is being kept of the number of hours they work, there can be a temptation to come in late or to take a long lunch hour or to leave early. The fact that there are no consequences for not working a full day means that the salaried worker could be tempted to work less, and that's the moral hazard. Another form of moral hazard occurs when someone has insurance. If I don't insure my house and it burns down, it's my loss. If I insure my house against fire, then I might not be as careful about storing flammable materials in the house or checking the wiring in the house, because though I don't want the house to burn down, I do have insurance just in case. That's the moral hazard. Now, these examples are admittedly a little extreme, but a more realistic and dangerous example of moral hazard occurred after the financial disruptions that occurred in 2008 and 2009. During that financial disruption, the concept of too big to fail developed to identify certain banks and financial institutions that if they failed, the result would be that other financial institutions and businesses would fail, and there would be this cascading series of business failures that could destroy the economy. The federal government's response to the problem of businesses that were considered too big to fail was to provide financial support to those businesses so that they wouldn't fail. When that financial support was provided, some of those businesses that had been deemed too big to fail, knowing that they wouldn't be allowed to fail, made some business decisions that were risky or riskier than they would normally have made. And some of those risks didn't turn out very well, and the financial consequences were absorbed by the federal government and taxpayers. Because those businesses were too big to fail and had been relieved of the consequences of their decisions, then some of those businesses made decisions that they wouldn't normally have made if they had known that they might be negative consequences that they had to deal with. The point is that when a negative consequence of decisions is eliminated, or when that consequence is diminished, some of the ethical principles that apply in decision making can be stripped away and unethical decisions can be made. Another focus of this unit is a code of ethics. Code of ethics is an organization's statement of the ethical guidelines that it intends to follow in carrying out its activities. A code of ethics provides guidance to everyone in the organization, provides support for ethical actions by those within the organization, and provides deterrence from unethical decisions. But with regard to deterrence, a code of ethics can present a moral hazard. Code of ethics are typically positive. We will treat everyone as we want to be treated. We will be fair in our dealings with others. We'll maintain the highest level of professionalism in dealing with our clients. And sometimes, in an effort to be as positive as possible, a code of ethics will leave out a discussion of consequences for failure to follow the organization's code of ethics. And that failure to discuss consequences creates the moral hazard. If an employee is expected to follow an organization's code of ethics, but the code of ethics doesn't specify the consequences for not following the code of ethics, the moral hazard is presented. Although the employee would presumably not intentionally fail to follow the code of ethics, unless violating the code of ethics would result in significant advantage for the employee, the lack of consequences for not following the code of ethics makes violating the code of ethics easier, and that's the moral hazard.